Hi, and welcome to Project 180. My name is Kevin McGowan. I am your host as we interview people from all across the project management universe. Today, we're going to be speaking with Andreea Demirgian. She is an accessibility specialist in the e-learning space, and I'm chatting with her in Ottawa.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Andreea Demirgian. I am a digital accessibility specialist, and I've been working in the field of accessibility for the past 5 years, focusing on e-learning accessibility for the last 2 years.
And that's a really, to me, it's a fascinating role in industry. I've been in learning for a long time, and it's often something that honestly a lot of people can forget, right? In terms of how important this is. You're building a thing, you're not necessarily thinking accessibility. But first, can you maybe explain to me and those listening what you mean by accessibility in e-learning and how that impacts the audience?
Of course, I think it's first and foremost a matter of equal access and equal opportunities for everybody. The goal of e-learning accessibility is to provide an inclusive learning experience for all learners, regardless of their physical, sensory, cognitive, or technological abilities. So this includes making sure that individuals with disabilities can fully engage and benefit from online educational content and resources. It starts from the very beginning when you begin to think about how to design your course, and it should absolutely not be an afterthought. It's a matter of inclusivity and social responsibility, and also of future-proofing your product. When you design a new online course, you want it to be viable online for a very long time. With the very fast advancement of technologies, making your course accessible from the very beginning ensures that it's going to be still visible to technologies later on when things develop fast. There is also a legal and an ethical obligation because a lot of countries have laws and regulations in place that mandate accessibility for digital content. That means educational materials, whatever activities you want to design into your course, whatever reference documents you want to include, they all need to be accessible, not only for people who can see or can hear, but for people who cannot use a keyboard or a mouse the way we are used to, for example, or use assistive technologies like screen readers or other assistive devices. Last but not least, it's about improving the learning experience and thinking about universal design for learning. So accessibility features such as well-structured content, alternative text for images, captions for videos, they don't only benefit individuals with disabilities, but also enhance the learning experience for all learners. Organization and content presentation can make the material more comprehensible and engaging. Also, it promotes universal design for learning, which is an educational framework that aims to cater to the diverse needs of learners by providing multiple means of representation, engagement, and expression.
I mean there's a lot to chew on there, but I think I'm so happy to have this conversation because I'm certainly not the level of expert you are. I'm aware of the issues, and I've spoken to a lot of teams and conferences even about how to make this part of your project planning. What point do you determine? I mean, there's legal implications and there's ethical implications, but like at what point in your planning process is this really important to jump on this and make sure that things are covered from an accessibility standpoint?
From the very beginning, because even when you start organizing your content in your manuscript, it's very important to kind of try and represent in your mind who is going to read your content, who is going to have to go through your activities, and can they click through things? Do they have to hover over objects for information, stuff like that? So I would say that in the life cycle of an e-learning course, even from the storyboard phase, this is when we have our initial meeting, and this is when we first start thinking about what are the best ways to convey the meanings that we are trying to convey and the messages that we are trying to make sure the learners do get in the end.
You raised a really interesting point in terms of kind of the longevity of the material.
Yes.
It's one thing to create, a learning object or a course or a new video or whatever you might be thinking of, but it's another to make it that it's relevant for a long time. So the planning for like a quick learning about a specific technology maybe that's constantly churning and evolving is a different experience than maybe what you're working on. How do you generally plan, and not even in terms of accessibility, but just to make, how do you make sure that it's going to last you 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, like to make sure it survives that kind of life cycle?
It really depends on the content that you are trying to package into something that can be presented online. I think the most important thing is to first understand what you need to do. There is a set of rules and specifications called WCAG, which is Web Content Accessibility Guideline. This has been created kind of as the rules of the road. So you can drive whatever type of vehicle you want. You can drive a bus, you can drive a car, you can drive a racing car, or you can drive a motorcycle. Everybody needs to obey the same set of rules. So this is WCAG for beginners. Now, when it comes about making a viable product, something that lasts for a very long time, because 2-3 years is a very long time online, all you have to do is consider how fast the technology is going to advance and what features of the authoring tools that you are using are going to help you, which features are going to help you to maintain your content still relevant. So I said it really depends on the content, because if you are talking about a course on legislation for tax, for example, things are moving very fast. They're evolving all the time. It is very hard to make something that is still going to be current in 2 years' time, because so many edits are done, so many updates are done. But thinking of a more conventional e-learning product, let's say something to onboard your new hires, something explaining the company philosophy and principles and goals and values, that is something that you can make viable for many years. All you have to do is to think about the abilities of people who are going to come into contact with your content. Some may have a temporary disability. I don't know, a broken arm is a temporary disability. Holding a baby in your arms prevents you to use both hands. That is not a disability, but it prevents you. It's a barrier. So basically, is being aware of the type of barriers that exist and finding a way around those barriers, finding a way to remove the barriers and to kind of try and prevent any difficulties that various people might have.
Now, in your work now, maybe previously, is there kind of a standard set of rules in the organization for how you approach this?
Yes, absolutely. So there is this universal design for learning principle that kind of draws a map for how things are supposed to be represented, because we are not talking now about the content of the course. We are talking about how you are packaging that course, what type of activities you are going to include in your course, how you are going to assess and evaluate your learners, and do they have multiple ways of accessing your information or not. There are barriers that can come up in any type of online content, or be it a website or just a PDF that is uploaded online. And some of them are, for example, the first that comes to mind is the lack of alternative texts. Alternative text is just something that helps screen reader users to understand visual context. It's explaining what a graphic is, what a diagram is, what a chart is trying to convey, for example. Alt text is not meant for decorative images like stock photos and stuff like that, because you have to be mindful not to force somebody who uses assistive technology to spend more than time and a half in a course than a person without disabilities would spend in the same content. Inaccessible documents, PDFs that are not tagged, are invisible to screen readers. I don't know, whatever type of document you are thinking about, a PowerPoint can be made accessible, a Word document can be made accessible. Forms need to be accessible, they have to be properly labeled. And buttons also, they have to be properly labeled. You have to think about how you organize your content so that it can be navigated by the structure, the titles and subtitles and section titles and chapters, stuff like that, which is very easy to do. Also, you have to think about an intuitive navigation. So if my experience going on online courses is one, I expect all the time to have a submit form for my answers, a submit button. I expect that in your course, the submit button is going to be roughly in the same position somewhere on the right-hand side under the questions. I have the submit button and I can go there and click on that. Color contrast is another very important thing, because if you let your you are a very creative and person, and you let your creativity run away with you, and you use pastels and all these types of colors that you can put together, sometimes you have to consider that maybe not everybody has the same 2020 vision as you do. So the combination of colors, backgrounds, and fonts, that needs to be something to worry about. Always consider that people with low vision might not be able to distinguish the font that you are using, the size of the font, the type of the font, and stuff like that. So there are very specific sets of rules for everything. Like, you cannot have a video online without captions anymore, because captions are important for people who cannot hear, but also for people whose first language is not English. My first language is not English, so I always have the captions on, just because it's easier for me to process the information like that. Also, if you have a video, you cannot have flashes, you cannot have very rapid movements on the screen, because those can trigger seizures in people who have vestibular diseases or suffer from epilepsy or stuff like that. So lots of checkpoints, lots of things to consider, but it's not impossible to achieve. E-learning, accessible e-learning, is not something that needs to be boring, black on white, no interaction and stuff like that. It's just something that you have to be very mindful and keep in mind that not all people can do what you can do. The best test is to try and run through your course or your content with your eyes closed, or using your left hand instead of your right hand, or just turning off your monitor and trying to see if you can still complete the activities and finish
Oh,
the course.
wow. Yeah, it's such a simple idea, but honestly, I've never even thought. Because I mean, I guess an ableist attitude, I guess, but I hadn't thought of just closing my eyes, trying to run through a course to see if it was possible. That's what a fantastic idea.
Yeah, this is how I teach my designers, my graphic designers and my e-learning designers, my instructional designers. This is the first thing that I tell them. So you have to have a screen reader, and that is not impossible. There are free screen readers out there. NVDA is an example. Just close your eyes. Close your eyes and try to navigate. It's very simple. You just use your arrows and your tab key and your enter and your space. Imagine that's all you can do. Turn off your monitor and see if you can complete the activities. If you can't, somebody else might not be able to either. So
Well, and this what
everybody. No, that's the first shock for everybody. Oh my God, I'm lost. What am I doing here?
well, yeah, and for any, I mean, whether it's learning or any user interface design, anything like that can benefit from this perspective, right? So when you're designing anything, again, whether it's learning, an interface, another product, like where do you start learning the right way to do it? Like where can a junior designer or somebody really make sure that they understand this deeply? Like, where's the best place to start?
That's a great question, because actually accessibility is not really taught in universities. It's relatively new, although the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, or AODA, which is the provincial law that we have to comply to, has been around since 2005. So here we are, 17 years later, still saying things are new. Several
Yeah, not
generations of
new.
graphic designers have graduated their university classes and still don't know how to do that. But there's hope. There are many universities and organizations and online platforms that offer courses and resources on creating accessible e-learning content. YouTube is an amazing resource. Google is an amazing resource, but there are established institutions that can help you get formal training in accessibility. If you cannot afford to go to a course like that because it's quite expensive, you can attend webinars and workshops that focus on accessibility in e-learning. Because these events often provide practical tips, best practices, real-world examples of creating accessible content. You can also look up people like me on LinkedIn and engage with accessibility experts or consultants who specialize in e-learning, because we can provide personalized guidance. We can provide, we can conduct audits. We can help implement accessible design principles. I think the main thing to do is to take some time and really try to familiarize yourself with accessibility guidelines like the WCAG that I was mentioning earlier, the rules of the road, as well as the federal and provincial laws. In Canada, we have the Accessible Canada Act. In Ontario, we have Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, AODA. These are the main laws that you need to familiarize yourself with. Of course, there's a lot of legalese. There's a lot of technical language that might not be as easy to understand. And this brings me to simple, clear language that is also a barrier for accessibility when you use overcomplicated language that can prove to be problematic. But once you get past this first shock where you will have to understand terms like area labels, I don't know, states and stuff like that, once you get the basic vocabulary, then it's easy to even self-teach. You can be a self-taught designer that also knows accessibility. Another thing is to choose your tools wisely. So for e-learning authoring tools, there are options out there that have a lot of these accessibility features incorporated, and they help you. Because if they have the built-in features and this type of integration for accessibility tools and accessibility assistive devices, then that helps you create accessible content. So it's very important to keep in mind that no matter what you do, no matter what tools you use, you will always have to add alt text to important images. You will always have to properly label your buttons. You will always have to signal that a button has been visited or not visited, or this is the active button and stuff like that. It doesn't matter what you're using. And then try and meet people with disabilities and ask them what their needs are. Ask them to test your courses. Ask them to give you their feedback, because their lived experience is incomparable to whatever you can learn by yourself. These are a couple of ideas for where to get education on that. There are lots of classes on LinkedIn. There are lots of classes on Udemy and all those other online learning platforms. So I think the first thing is to consider it, to be interested in it, and to start doing it.
It's amazing. I have one more question for you, so we can wrap things up. How did you start down this path? What was so interesting about this part of e-learning for you personally when you got into the biz?
Well, in my previous life, meaning before I came to Canada, I was a journalist. I worked for a national broadcast company, and part of my reporting was on people with disabilities, minorities, equal opportunities, feminism, stuff like that. So when I came to Canada, I thought I spent a lifetime telling stories about barriers that people encounter. How about I start doing something to remove the barriers? And I was fortunate enough to find a postgraduate course at a college in Ontario that is no longer offered, unfortunately, but that was my intro to accessibility. It was a one-year postgrad certificate that opened the door in this industry, and then I just started working. First as a document accessibility specialist, and now I'm doing e-learning. And I have to say, as an e-learning accessibility specialist, I get to do everything. It's web accessibility, document accessibility, learning accessibility. It's everything packaged in one product.
It's a lot to work on. It's amazing. Well, look, Andreea, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it, but we should wrap it up there. How can you mentioned, hey, people can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Where can people find you if they would like to ask any questions?
On LinkedIn, I don't know how to spell my name.
I'll put the link right here.
Okay.
When we edit, I'll put the link
right here, and you can find me on LinkedIn. And I'm more than willing to work with inquisitive minds. And I'm so happy to see people growing into this field and understanding what an enormous value they bring when they include accessibility from the start in their products and projects.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Kevin.